Hi all, in this video we'll write the derived class Point3D. So let's get started with Point3D. So first thing, the child class name is Point3D. So class Point3D, and let's say we are doing public inheritance. Public inheritance of Point2D. Okay. And whenever the term inheritance comes to your mind, imagine what's there for you. Okay. This is something the compiler gets and keeps there for you. You don't need to worry about it. So when we are doing public inheritance, what was protected will be protected here. Integer x, integer y, and then what was public will be public point 2d point 2d, which takes in two integers, integer x, integer y, and then all the other functions are available here. Think of that. And lastly, I'll go ahead and declare the class specific protected variables, protected, and I'll say int z. And then I will write the public members. Okay, I will write the public members. First, a default constructor, a parameterized constructor that takes in three parameters, integer type x, integer type y, integer type z. And then I'm writing the setPoint function. And I'll talk about this function later. But for now, this function in here takes and then I'll write the get z function, int get z, and last I'll write void display point 3d. The goal is to print all x, y, and z here. So if you see, this is how I defined point 3d. It has a z, it has a couple of constructors, a set point, a get, a display. And one interesting thing, if you notice, there is a function that is repeating twice. There is a function called setPoint, which takes two integers, and then setPoint, which takes three integers. And we'll talk about it in the upcoming video. But for now, let's get started coding it. Again, every class that we are writing, it will have its own header file. Okay. And class Point3D is inheriting class Point2D. Okay. So I have to tell what Point2D is first. So include Point2D.h. Okay. I told the compiler what Point2D is. Now, as soon as we extend the class, what this means is that what was there here, all these functions, okay, all the following are inherited uh, I'm not sure about the spelling, just check it, inherited from point 2D. So all these are imaginary. So there is a protected scope with X and Y. So just imagine them. And then there is public scope with point 2D, all the constructors get X, get Y. So all these are inherited. So that means you just imagine them that they are there. Okay. And now we will write this class's own protected variables int z, and then we will write the public members point 3d point 3d that takes in three arguments index int y int z, and then void set point that takes three arguments index int y int z, and we'll write int get z, and last void display point 3d. These are all the functions. Now, after writing all the functions, my next task is to write an implementation function. Point 3D, sorry, implementation file, point 3D imp.cpp. And the way I go about writing the implementation, so the first thing I have to tell that I'm including point 3d.h. Okay. After including point 3d.h, I have to implement these functions. Okay. The first one is point 3d default constructor. Okay. Point 3d default constructor. If you see, these are in protected mode. That means you can access them. Okay. So if member variables of parent class are in protected mode, you can access them here. And another thing, there is already a code written for you. Like I can do both the ways. I can do both the ways. Like I can set, remember the way we are initializing constructors. These are in protected. This is also in protected. So means I can access X, Y, and Z as well. I can either do X of 0, Y of 0, Z of 0. But if you notice, I have already written these two lines somewhere. I don't want to rewrite. Where did I write those two lines? If you see, those two lines I have written here under point 2D constructor. So all I have to do is call point 2D constructor. And point 2D constructor, if you see, this is in public scope. That means I can access it here. And then done with the default constructor. Let's see parameterized constructor. Again, X, Y, Z, all of them are in same scope. Protected, protected, protected. You can always do this. X of X, Y of Y, Z of Z. And there's no one stopping you. You can always do. But you have already written these two somewhere. Okay. You have already written these two somewhere. And which is vehicle, sorry, point 2D X comma Y. So this way you can initialize the constructor. Now, the last point, uh, this is like an interesting function. Why it is interesting? Because there is a function set point that takes two parameters. There is this function set point that takes three parameters. Okay, three parameters x, y, z. So now both these are in same scope, point 3D, point 3D. But what I want to tell is, I want to do something like this. This of x equal to x, this of y equal to y, this of z equal to z. Because all these three are in same scope protected, I can do this. But somewhere I have done this already. This of x equal to x, this of y equal to y. So if you go to point 2D implementation, I'm already doing this. But a small confusion is both these functions are taking the same name. Set point, set point. The only difference is in parent class or in the base class or in point 2D, set point has only two parameters. Whereas in point 3D, set point takes three parameters. Okay. In this case, I can replace these two lines and I can use this function set point. Okay. So use the function set point, which takes two parameters, x and y. But now, as soon as you do this, there is an issue. It says set point has too few arguments. It is expecting three because I'm calling this inside the file point3d implementation.cpp. In point3d implementation.cpp, set point, I am overriding. Okay. So let me show real quick. There is one set point. With two integers. But the moment I'm writing this set point, the compiler will no longer remember this set point. So that means in point 3D, the compiler is expecting a set point with 1, 2, 3 arguments. So if I am in point 3D, the compiler is expecting set point with 3 arguments, but I'm only giving 2. The reason why I'm only giving 2 because point 2D has set point with 2 parameters. So to resolve this conflict, when you are overriding a function, when you are changing the function, the number of argument it takes, then if you want to use the function from your parent or base class, all you have to do is you have to specify that this function is from parent class or base class. So this way, if there are two functions with same name but different number of arguments, this is how we call them. And the last point 3D get z, all you have to do is return z and display point 3D. All we have to do in the display function is I want to display cout x cout y endl cout z endl. So, but if you see, I've already written these two lines somewhere, which is point 2D, display point 2D. So that means I have to call this function. Instead of these two, I'm simply calling this function. So now notice the difference between calling set point, calling display point 2D. There is only one function display point 2D, but there are two functions set point, which takes 3 arguments, and set point, which takes 2 arguments. When there is same function with different number of arguments, same function with different number of arguments, to tell the compiler specifically, hey, call this function with 2 arguments, which was in this class. when there are two different functions, display point2D, display point2D, you don't need to tell which class it is from. Compiler would be able to figure it out. So in this way, we are going about writing all the implementation files required for assignment 3. That's all in this video. Thank you.